My name is Maeve Harrow, and I used to believe a house was made of walls. Now I know it's made of listening. When my husband Rowan died in the winter of 2018, the walls stopped listening. The kettle hissed like a tired breath, and even the light through the curtains seemed to lose its weight. People filled the first weeks with casseroles and concern, each one wrapped in foil, each one cooling faster than the last. They told me to keep busy, as if sorrow were something that could be swept into corners with a broom. I did try. I watered his plants, folded his flannel shirts, and pretended that sound could replace presence. But silence has a shape, and it filled every room like fog. When my son Carter came by one afternoon, tall, kind-eyed, already late for something, he said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that big old place. Come stay with us for a bit, just until you feel steady." Well, he meant well. He always means well. And I was so tired of hearing the refrigerator talk back louder than people. So I said yes. We packed 3 boxes, dishes Rowan and I bought in our first year, his worn chess set, and the cookie tin where I kept letters too painful to reread. Carter's wife Lena waited by their porch in Northbridge, a neat suburb where lawns are disciplined and mailboxes smile in matching paint. "Welcome, Maeve," she said brightly. Her smile belonged to a photograph more than to a face. She took my boxes, but not my hands. At first, it was polite. They gave me the guest room at the back of the house, narrow but clean, with a window that faced a lemon tree. Every morning I'd watch the leaves tilt toward the sun, as if praying. I began to memorize the rhythm of their household. Blender at 7, car doors at 8, silence at 9. But politeness, when stretched too thin, starts to tear. Lena liked order, not the kind that brings peace, the kind that erases traces. She labeled jars, folded towels by color, and arranged her kitchen like a showroom. One day, when I reached for a mug, she said, "Oh, Maeve, not that one. Those are for pictures." I blinked. "Pictures?" She said, "For the brand. My wellness followers love minimalism." She laughed like glass tapping glass. I smiled back, trying to find humor where there was only distance. Soon there were small corrections, little needles sewing me smaller. "Could you keep your shoes by the back door? Maybe don't start laundry till after I film my morning routine. Oh, I already ate. There's a smoothie for you in the fridge." I wanted to help, so I cooked dinner one evening, Rowan's lentil stew, heavy with time and memory. Lena took one bite and said, "It's hearty." Then she ordered takeout and posted a story captioned, "Self-care means saying no even to tradition." Carter tried to bridge things. He'd pat my shoulder, say, "Don't take it personally, Mom. She's just particular." But empathy without action is wallpaper over mold. So I adapted. I folded laundry. I walked Millie to school. I learned to make myself invisible at the right times. Invisible people are useful. They never interrupt the lighting. Evenings blurred into one another. When guests visited, Lena would glance at me with her hostess smile and whisper, "Mom's resting." Then she'd close my door. At first, I told myself it was kindness. She wanted me to have quiet. But the quiet began to sound like exclusion. In that narrow room, the lemon tree became my calendar. I knew the weeks by how many fruits turned gold. One afternoon, while I was folding towels, I heard voices from the living room. My name landed in the air, hard like dropped cutlery. "She's a drain," Lena said. "We could claim caregiver benefits if she stays long enough. There's paperwork for that." Carter's voice lowered. "Don't talk like that." "I'm talking practical. The woman refuses to sell the old house. Do you know how much equity's just sitting there?" Silence stretched. Then Carter muttered, "She'll never sign anything." "Then make her think it's for her comfort. You're her son. She trusts you." Something mechanical clicked on the coffee table, a small white hub, its tiny ring of light pulsing like a heartbeat. Their voice assistant, always listening. They didn't care. Maybe they forgot it heard. I stood there, clutching a towel, the scent of lavender detergent catching in my throat. Rowan had always said, "We plan not because we distrust, but because love needs protection from time." Back then, I thought it was romantic paranoia. Now I understood. In the closet of our old home, he'd taped a small red envelope behind his winter coat. I'd taken it with me, habit, not foresight. That night, under the crocheted blanket, I pulled it out. My hands trembled so much the paper almost tore. Inside, 3 sentences in his tidy engineer's script. "If you feel small in your own name, call Judith. If they make you quiet, make notes. When the door won't open, don't knock, document." There was a phone number, a law firm, and a name. Judith Baines. I whispered it out loud, tasting steel and safety at once. I didn't call, not yet, not until I knew what I was calling for. Days folded like napkins. Lena began using words like boundaries and energy. "You drain the atmosphere when you hover," she'd say sweetly. I started eating meals after they finished. She'd leave me leftovers in glass containers labeled mindful portions. Once, during a dinner with her influencer friends, she told a story about having an elder in the house. Everyone laughed at her imitation of my slow walk. "She's adorable," Lena said, winking. "A relic, but charming." I kept washing dishes, the hot water hiding my tears. Carter looked uncomfortable but said nothing. His silence was polite, not brave. There's a difference. After that night, I stopped setting an extra place at the table. I bought a cheap notebook at the pharmacy. On the first page, I wrote, "For Rowan, for remembering." Then every evening I recorded small things. June 4th, Lena says I shouldn't nap in the living room. It ruins her filming backdrop. June 7th, door shut when guests arrived. 7:10 p.m., opened again 9:45. June 10th, old bird, said jokingly, tone, sharp. It felt foolish at first, like a diary kept by someone waiting to be believed. But words on paper weigh more than thoughts in air. Sometimes I'd hear them from behind my door, planning trips I wasn't part of, complaining about bills, about me. Lena said once, "She eats like a stray dog, always grateful." Carter didn't laugh, but he didn't leave the room either. The next morning, I replaced gratitude with observation. That's when survival quietly became strategy. One morning, I noticed the lemon tree had dropped half its fruit overnight. The ground was a mosaic of yellow and bruises. I knelt by the window and whispered, "You're tired too, huh?" I wanted to call my old neighbor, Mrs. Calder, but Lena had changed the Wi-Fi password for security. My phone barely worked outside. Control hides best inside courtesy. That evening, Lena announced a digital detox week. She unplugged the television and hid the router. "We'll reconnect as a family," she said. But family means shared choice, not enforced silence. I wrote again in my notebook, July 1, digital detox, isolation disguised as virtue. Then I tucked the notebook under the cookie tin beside the spare keys. The day it changed was ordinary. I had made vegetable soup, my small peace offering. Carter was late. Lena filmed a recipe reel. Millie asked, "Grandma, can I have bread?" Lena snapped, "Carbs are for weekends, sweetie." Something in me, something old, not angry but ancient, stood up. "Millie," I said gently, "there's bread in the pantry. Have a slice." Lena's smile cracked. "Maeve, we've talked about consistency." "I'm teaching her kindness, not calories," I replied. Her face tightened. "Please don't contradict me in front of my child." Carter entered then, sensing smoke too late. "What's going on?" "Your mother's undermining me again," Lena said. He sighed, pinched his nose, murmured, "Can we not do this right now?" And that was the end of the conversation, but not of the quiet that followed. That night, I found the pantry locked with a small steel cable. Lena smiled sweetly when I noticed. "Just until I reorganize. Don't take it personally." The lock gleamed like punctuation at the end of patience. I sat on my bed, the baby monitor, once used for Millie, still plugged into the wall, its red light blinking. I hadn't noticed it before, or maybe I hadn't wanted to. When I leaned close, I could hear the faint hum of their voices downstairs. Not words yet, just rhythm, then clearer. "Can't she move to assisted living? We'd still get the credit." A pause. Carter's softer tone. "She trusts me, Lena. I can't." "She won't even notice. Old birds don't fight." I looked at the red light and whispered, "You'll remember this for me." Then I opened my notebook and wrote, July 12, pantry locked, recorded conversation, intent to transfer benefits, evidence exists. My hands shook, but not from fear, from relief. Because the moment you start recording the storm,
It stops owning the thunder. I reread Rowan's note again. If they make you quiet, make notes. Quiet I could do. Notes I already had. What I needed now was the first line of action. At dawn, before the house woke, I dialed the number from the letter. 1 ring, 2, then a calm female voice. Judith Baines speaking. I didn't speak right away, just breathed. Finally, I said, "My husband told me you could help when silence became unsafe." A pause, then warmth. "Maeve, I was wondering when you'd call."
"Maeve," Judith Baines said, voice steady as wool, "do you have a pen?" I looked at the notebook on my lap, the same one where I wrote down every small unkindness, and smiled without realizing. "I do." "Good," she said. "This is about careful steps, not spectacle. We'll do nothing that puts you in harm's way. We'll use only what the house already reveals." I told her about the voice hub and the baby monitor that blinked like a tired star. I told her about the locked pantry, the closed doors, the dinner plates for pictures, the word relic dressed as a compliment, the phrase old bird that Lena made from sugar and grit. Judith listened without interrupting, and in that silence I recognized the rarest kind, the kind that holds. "We'll open a private case file," she said, "and I'll loop in Brinwell and Pace, the elder rights firm your husband trusted. You'll remain the narrator here, Maeve. Nothing goes forward without your consent. Are you ready?" I stared at the lemon tree's trembling leaves. "I'm ready," I said, "because I want this, not for revenge, for room." "Room," Judith repeated quietly, writing the word down. "All right." That afternoon, while the house performed wellness, diffuser fog, a bowl of washed pebbles beside a candle, Judith texted a link to a secure portal. Rowan set it up. "Upload what you're comfortable with. Dates, quotes, recordings the home devices capture legally. If you're unsure, leave it. We err on dignity, not drama." I uploaded my pages, photographing them with hands that didn't shake. I uploaded the audio from the baby monitor. Nothing cinematic, just the low thud of ordinary cruelties stepping back and forth across the floorboards. I noted the pantry lock, the door closings, the times and days when dinner arrived cold with a smile. Brinwell and Pace scheduled a quiet consultation. A young associate named Marta spoke like clear water. "Our first aim is to protect your autonomy and your assets," she said over the phone while I wiped the counter slow enough to look lazy. "We'll document patterns, not just incidents. If there's neglect, we'll report to Elder Protective Services, but only if you consent." "What about Carter?" I asked, the word son lodged like a pit in my throat. "Love makes good people stand still," Marta said gently. "We won't assume malice where there's paralysis, but we will draw boundaries. You deserve the kind that keep you intact." I nodded to an empty room, and then I made soup. Judith arrived 2 days later disguised as a friend from Shire. Lena greeted her with the kind of hospitality you keep in a storage bin with the seasonal decor. Come in," Lena said, teeth all present. "Maeve's friends are always welcome." Judith set a paper bag on the counter. "I brought lemon bars." Her eyes brushed mine. "We'll keep this simple." Then, with Lena's permission, "We've been meaning to upgrade." She installed a smart doorbell at the front door. It faced the steps and the slant of the street, not the private rooms. It broke no lines, crossed no laws, but it heard the tone people used when they reached for the handle, and that tone mattered. A few days later, she returned with a picture frame that was a picture frame. Rowan and me on our 40th, laughing in a way that made the cake look extra bright. It also happened to have a built-in camera focused on the kitchen island, the commons of the house. She placed it without ceremony. "Oh, that's sweet," Lena said. "Vintage vibe." "Vintage is a good way to last," Judith replied softly. The old baby monitor stayed where it was on my dresser, a museum piece that still worked. At night, when the house forgot it was overheard, it told on itself. The words weren't cinematic, they were worse. They were bureaucratic. "Did you lock the pantry back?" "Don't let her text you during the day." "Keep your boundaries." "Stipend applications require proof of..." "We can find a way." I wrote it down, I uploaded, I breathed. The tragedy of ordinary unkindness is that it looks like housekeeping: a drawer closed, a plate relocated, a smile unchanged. Carter took longer showers those weeks. I could hear the indecision steaming off the glass. When he left for work, he would put a hand on my shoulder as if to say, "Still here," and then remove it as if to say, "But not too much." Love that doesn't move becomes costume. One evening, Lena's friends came over with cameras the size of alarm clocks and voices that turned the air fizzy. "Content house," one of them squealed. Through my door, closed for aesthetics, they'd say. They heard them practice a segment on caring for elders without losing yourself. The irony floated off the ceiling and into my mouth like a bitter sugar. Judith texted me the next morning, "Maeve, how are you holding up?" I wrote back, "I'm learning what my quiet is for." She replied with a heart that I could somehow hear. The pantry remained locked. On Monday, the refrigerator joined it, closed with a cable crane lifted from some novelty hardware corner. "Just until Monday," Lena chirped, filming herself with a jar of chia seeds. "We're doing a reset." "Do I need a key?" She smiled almost kindly. "Just tell me when you're hungry." I didn't. I took a small apple from the fruit bowl and slid it into the dresser next to the baby monitor. It was not rebellion. It was stewardship. I wanted to know that there was one thing in this house that answered to my hunger when I felt it. That night, voices rose, not about me at first, about money, about ambassadorships wilting, about Carter's raise that didn't bloom. My name arrived as a concept, not a person. If we had her benefits, she's not a spreadsheet. We could refinance if... She won't live forever. Don't say that. I mean, statistically, the baby monitor pulse read, faithful as a heartbeat. I looked at it and felt something like respect for the object. Not affection, just gratitude that it would not be gaslit. I wrote, "Record. Discussion of benefits, longevity framed as logistics. Pantry and fridge locked. Apple moved to dresser. Food autonomy." And then, despite the speech I could have made to the ceiling, to the lemon tree, to my late husband's quiet coat, I went to sleep because tomorrow would want a steady hand. Our role is to ensure you are not coerced, isolated, or financially exploited. From what you've documented, we see patterns that concern us. Again, we move only with your permission. "Permission," I whispered, tasting the word like bread after a fast. "Yes." They guided me through practical things first. Password changes on accounts Rowan had set up, dual authentication tokens mailed to my new P.O. box, Judith's idea, plain as unpainted wood. They placed gentle barricades around the edges of my name, a flag on my bank account that triggered a personal call to me for any major transfer, and a document in the county clerk's office noting I was not to be removed from my old home without notarized consent, and a durable power of attorney naming no one knew. Maeve, you're not closing doors to your family, you're closing windows where drafts get in. I exhaled. The house felt less cold. There was one more thread Rowan had left for me, a name scribbled at the bottom of a postcard, Sarah Vale. He'd admired her reporting, said she asked the kind of questions that made lies walk themselves outside. Judith hesitated when I brought her up. Press can be weather. It waters seeds and it also blows hats off. She smiled. But Sarah's different. If we reach out, we do so to illuminate systems, not to stage anyone's personal ruin. Are you sure? I thought of the locked pantry. I thought of other kitchens and other houses where other women stood with their hand on a steel cable and told themselves it was for health. Yes, I said. If she wants to tell a bigger story, I'll be one thread. Sarah met me under the jacarandas where the shade looked like spilled ink. She left her camera in her bag. She didn't film my face, just my hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea. "What do you want out of this?" she asked me, voice tuned to human. I said room, again, surprised by the consistency of my need. Protective room, and light that's big enough to show how small hurts become large cages. Room, she repeated like Judith had. All right. We spoke for an hour. I gave her nothing that would tighten a fist and everything that would open an eye. The caseworker from Elder Protective Services came on a Sunday when the house wore its prettiest robes. Lena greeted her with a posture that photographed well. "We're passionate about wellness," she said, which was true in the way a slogan is true. The caseworker's eyes landed everywhere slowly. The pantry lock, the refrigerator cable, the guest room with its bed made too tight. "Do you have access to food when you're hungry?" she asked me softly. I wanted to be dignified and also honest. "There's an apple in my dresser," I said, and even the lemon tree seemed to hold its breath. We walked back to the kitchen. Carter stood very straight, a boy who'd wandered into a principal's office that smelled like lemon cleaner. The caseworker asked routine questions and wrote routine answers, which is how protection begins. When she left, Lena turned to me with a smile wrapped tight. "You could have told me you invited government into our home," she said in a voice calibrated for microphones. I didn't. I invited help. She remembered the doorbell camera then and inhaled her next sentence like smoke. "We'll talk later," she said through teeth that didn't quite fit. We didn't. 2 days later, Sarah's piece went live. She called it "The Quiet Economy of Elder Neglect" and used no names. She didn't need them. The images were ordinary: a pantry with a lock, a photo frame containing a couple forever laughing while present-day voices at its edge said unsmall things, a caseworker's clipboard, the outline of my hand against a window where a lemon blurred into sun. My voice came in only as text on screen. Silence isn't empty. It's evidence learning to speak.
The comments arrived like weather, not all kind, but enough righteous to change the pressure. People recognized their own kitchens, their own steel cables disguised as reset weeks, their own words they wished they could take back. By evening, one of Lena's brand partners posted a statement about values. Another quietly left an email unread. Carter called in sick. The house developed a hum like an anxious beehive. I stood at the window and watched the lemons hold their light. Carter knocked on my door long after the language of the house had gone to bed. He came in without his armor, shoulders round as a question mark. "Mom?" he said, and the word landed like an apology that wanted a place to sit. He pressed his hands together in front of him, a posture from childhood. "I am so ashamed," he said, "for how still I stood while things hurt you." I felt a hand on my back that wasn't there, Rowan's way of saying, "Be kind where you can." You can be ashamed if it makes you move. Shame that sits becomes furniture. He nodded, eyes wet. "I don't know how to fix this." You can start by learning a different kind of quiet, one that listens and then acts, one that doesn't protect the person doing the harm just because confrontation makes you sweat. He swallowed. "I'll try," I said softly. "Don't try, practice." He breathed like someone who had found the edge of a pool and needed to learn walking again. Brinwell and Pace had prepared the logistics for a move before anyone in this house knew it was happening. Not a midnight flight, just an ordinary exit with extraordinary care. The sable inlet villa that Rowan had tucked into a trust held its door open in my mind like a pair of arms. Judith handled the ground. A locksmith scheduled for the new place, utilities turned on, my name engraved back onto things I'd given up the right to say I owned. "We'll meet you there," she said. "When you walk out, you don't look back to check if you're allowed." I packed my 3 taped boxes, the cookie tin, Rowan's chess set, the red envelope that had already done its job but deserved to come. I left a note on the kitchen island. "Carter, I love you. Learn a quiet that moves. Lena, I wish you gentleness you don't have to perform. Please do not contact me about my accounts or property. Judith has my number if you need official communication. Maeve." Lena would call the note passive-aggressive. It was neither. It was precise. I rolled my suitcase down the hall. The doorbell camera watched me as neutral as a moon. The lemon tree made a soft sound I chose to hear as blessing. Carter met me on the porch, eyes rimmed pink. "Do you need a ride?" "Yes," I said, "but not from you today." He flinched, then nodded. "I'll call you in a week." "To listen," he said, correcting the sentence midair like a student who wants to pass the class of his own life. I touched his cheek. "I believe you can become the man who would have protected me, even if you weren't him yet." Judith's car pulled up, neutral gray, tires whispering dignity. I got in. We drove away without anyone running after us, and let me tell you, Leaving without chase is a quiet miracle. The villa was smaller than I had imagined from Rowan's letter, and that made it perfect. Light collected in the kitchen as if it paid rent. The windows open to water that debated the shore in a language I already knew. Judith carried in the first bag and set it on the counter. "Welcome home," she said, then placed a piece of paper beside it. "Utilities transferred. Lax changed at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Your accounts secure. A gardener named Luis will come Thursdays if you want him. He's kind to old trees." I touched the counter with both palms. I hadn't realized how long it had been since a surface felt like mine. "Thank you," I managed. She brewed tea like it was a sacrament. We sat without talking, not the stiff silence of staging, not the chilled politeness of someone else's schedule, just air and breath and the sound of a lemon being cut with a small knife. "Sharowan asked me to give you this when you arrived," she said finally, handing me another envelope, beige and unromantic. Inside was a letter. "If the world forgets your shape, I want you to have a place that remembers," Rowan had written in his slow print. "Room, Maeve. Save your room, and then share it." I folded over the corner the way he used to and put it in the cookie tin, which now sounded less like rescue and more like continuity. The first night, I slept 12 hours and woke with tears already on my face, as if my body had been doing its remembering without me. The second, I made eggs and ate them hot. The third, I walked to the community center to ask if the evening literacy program still existed. It did. The coordinator looked at my hands like they were good tools. "Can you start next week?" she asked. "I can start now," and laughed at the fierceness in my own answer. Later, Judith and Marta met me at the small dining table. We signed 2 documents, one confirming Brinwell and Pace's continuing representation, and one establishing a charitable account that could someday, if I wanted, seed small grants for grandchildren raised by grandparents. I wrote the temporary name in the margin, "The Quiet Orchard." Marta smiled. "Why orchard?" "Because orchards don't broadcast," I said. "They just keep bearing fruit if you tend them, and because roots do their best work where it's quiet." "We'll file the paperwork when you're ready," she said. "There's no clock on healing." I opened the window. The inlet exhaled. Carter texted me 2 days after I moved. "I'm in therapy. I started today. I want to learn the kind of quiet you mean." Then a separate message. "Millie misses you. Can we come by this Saturday? No agenda. I'll bring groceries and I'll fix whatever needs fixing."
I stared at the words long enough to feel them settle. Then I typed, Saturday at 3. Bring your listening. He replied with a heart that didn't make noise. Lena didn't text. Instead, a lawyer sent an email proposing a healing conversation captured on film for awareness monetization and requesting I sign a collaborative content release. I forwarded it to Judith, who responded with a sentence that felt like someone closing a window before a storm. No further contact except through counsel. I poured key. The house held. On Saturday, Carter and Millie arrived carrying grocery bags that were not a bribe, but a contribution. Oranges, bread, eggs, tea. He noticed the wobble in the porch step and fixed it with a screwdriver he'd brought without being asked. He moved like someone learning the weight of his own hands. Millie ran to the lemon tree in the yard and pressed her face into its leaves. "Why is it called Quiet Orchard?" she asked when I told her the name of the fund I wanted to build. "Because quiet is where roots talk to the earth," I said, "and because sometimes being still is how you grow strong." Carter listened, eyes soft. He didn't apologize again. He asked where the spare light bulbs were and replaced the one above the sink. This, too, was a sentence. They left before sunset. Carter hugged me carefully, like holding something valuable he was just remembering he owned. I watched them go and felt something in my chest unclench, but not fully. Healing, I realized, is a rope bridge, not a hallway. On Monday morning, while I sharpened pencils for the evening class, the phone rang with a number I recognized in my bones. "Maeve," Carter said, voice careful. "Lena wants to talk to you. She says." "No," I said gently. He exhaled. "Okay. She can speak to Judith." And Carter, "Yes? Don't try to carry both of us. Put yourself where you can move." The line stayed quiet in a way that felt like someone rearranging furniture in their mind. "I'm learning," he said. "I know. Learning is a long verb." We ended the call and placed the phone on the table beside the pencils lined like small new trees. I stood at the window and looked at the inlet smoothing itself back and forth, practicing forever. A breeze touched the lemon leaves. A sparrow did not dramatize landing. The house
listened.
The villa at Sable Inlet became my lungs. I didn't realize how long I'd been holding my breath until the air here touched me. It smelled of salt, lemons, and unfinished mornings. For the first few weeks, I barely moved. My days were a quiet choreography of tea, sunlight, and remembering how to belong to my own body. Sometimes I caught myself listening for Lena's footsteps or Carter's sigh in the hallway. Ghost habits, not ghosts. When the silence grew too large, I filled it with sound that didn't need approval. The hum of the kettle, the whisper of a pen across paper, or the soft crack of toast cooling on a plate. Rowan would have said, "Routine is recovery, May." He'd be right again. One morning, as the sea pressed its pulse against the rocks, I found another envelope inside the cookie tin. It wasn't red this time, just plain brown, folded beneath the receipts and my old notebook. The handwriting stopped me. Rowan's, again, fainter now, as though even his ink had aged. If this reaches you, it means you did the hardest part. You stayed long enough to know when to leave. I wanted to give you something not made of money or property, but direction. Do something with your peace, May. Don't just sit in it. Plant it somewhere it can multiply. I read that letter at the kitchen table until the sun crossed the floorboards and reached my feet. Plant it somewhere it can multiply. I looked outside at the lemon tree bending under the sea wind. It seemed to nod. A week later, I visited the community center. The walls smelled like pencils and disinfectant. A sign read, "Adult literacy, volunteers needed." The coordinator, a woman named Celia, looked up when I entered. "Are you here for the evening classes?" "Yes," I said, "but not as a student, as a helper. I used to teach." Celia smiled the way people do when a prayer gets an answer. "Can you start tonight?" I did. That first evening, I wrote the alphabet in chalk. The letters looked awkward at first, like old bones learning to dance again. But when one of the students, a grandmother named Maya, traced her own name for the first time, I felt something shift. Later, I told her, "Writing your name is a way of saying I exist." She nodded, tears shining in the fluorescent light. "I didn't know
it would feel like breathing. After class, I walked home under the streetlights and thought, this is the orchard he meant. Rowan hadn't asked me to start a charity. He had asked me to plant peace. And peace, I realized, grows best in shared soil. So I called Judith. I'd like to create something small, I told her. Not for publicity, just for continuity. Something that helps grandparents raising grandchildren or anyone who's been made to feel small in their own home. Judith listened quietly, then said, "We can set up a foundation, a trust under your name, seated with the remainder of Rowan's accounts. We'll need a name." I already had one. The Quiet Orchard. "Beautiful," she said. "Why orchard?" I replied, "Because orchards don't shout. They just keep bearing fruit if you tend them." Within weeks, we had papers drawn, a modest account, and a small website that didn't feature faces, just hands planting things. I didn't expect attention, but when Sarah Valley found out, she called me. "I'd like to mention your fund in a follow-up. No names, just the idea that silence can become service. Only if it helps someone else stand up quietly," I said. The next month, donations began to arrive. $10 from a retired nurse, $50 from a woman who signed simply "for my mother," $1,000 from a man who wrote, "She was like you. She kept notes too." Each name was a fruit, each story a seed. Carter started coming on Saturdays, never announced, never late. He'd bring groceries and questions. One afternoon, he stood fixing a loose cabinet hinge while I peeled oranges. "Mom," he said, not looking up, "I'm still learning how to forgive myself." "Good," I said. "That means you're still growing." He smiled faintly. "Therapy helps, and so does doing. I've been volunteering at a housing clinic. They help caregivers who don't have support. It's humbling." "That's the right kind of quiet," I told him. He nodded. "Millie wants to see you more. Lena doesn't. That's all right. Some people aren't ready to face the sound of their own echo." He laughed softly. Then, after a pause, "You know, I used to think strength was noise, decisions, leadership, certainty, but you make me think it's actually restraint." "It's both. Noise builds things, restraint keeps them standing." He put the screwdriver down and leaned against the counter and looked at me like he finally saw the person inside the title Mother. He said, "I'm proud of you." The words felt light. They didn't need to apologize for being late. We held the first quiet orchard ceremony in June. 10 envelopes, 10 families, 10 reasons to believe kindness can pay forward quietly. The community center's yard smelled of lemonade and cut grass. Children ran between the chairs, shoelaces untied. Maya, my student, helped hand out certificates. I didn't make a speech. I just stood there, watching the light fall on all those faces and thinking, this is what survival looks like when it starts to bloom.
She had drawn herself a lemon tree with hearts instead of fruit. When the sun began to drop, Sarah arrived with a pie wrapped in foil. "No story today," she said, smiling. "Just dessert." I laughed. "That's better than headlines." After the guests left, Carter stayed behind to fold chairs. "You've built something good, Mom," he said. "Dad would be proud." "I think he already is," I whispered. A week later, an envelope arrived addressed in Lena's handwriting. I could tell she hadn't slept. The lines slanted. It read, "Maeve, I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought order was love. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledgement. If you ever want to talk, maybe we could record something to help others see both sides." I stared at the word record. Even her remorse had a brand. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the cookie tin. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Some apologies are meant to be archived, not answered. I wrote back only one line. "May you find silence that heals, not hides." Then I mailed it. At the literacy class, Maya stayed after one evening. She had written her first full paragraph, a letter to her grandson. She read it aloud, her voice trembling. When she finished, she looked at me. "How did you know when to stop being quiet?" I smiled. "I didn't stop. I just changed what my quiet was for." She nodded slowly. "So silence can mean strength?" "It can mean choice," I said. "Strength is what you do with the space it gives you." That night, I walked home under a full moon that looked like forgiveness. I thought of every woman I had ever known who swallowed her words to keep the peace. Maybe what we're really doing when we stay silent is waiting for language that's safe to speak. Now I think I found mine. The inlet glowed honey in the evening light. Carter and Millie came over once a week now. She liked to draw the lemons, insisting each one had a face. Carter fixed the fence post and stayed for dinner. He laughed easier. The air between us was no longer apology. It was recognition. When they left, I sat on the porch with a candle. The flame leaned in the breeze, but didn't go out. I opened my old notebook, the one that once held pain. On the last blank page, I wrote 3 sentences. Silence used as a shield can still be strong. Silence used as a tool can still be kind. I am not alone. I am listening to myself. I closed it, placed it beside the candle, and watched the wick's last glow. If you're still here with me, maybe you felt it too, the way peace sneaks back in when you stop asking permission to have it. And if you're still listening, tell me in the comments, have you ever changed what your silence was for? Because here on True Life Stories, we don't just tell stories, we remember them. Subscribe, stay with us, and help the silence end, one true story at a time.